What's going on, movie fans? Today we're diving straight into a spin-off movie of a beloved series we all know and love, John Wick. That's right, we're talking about the world of John Wick, Ballerina. My name is Kyle. Thank you for jumping into Movie Tactics with me today. Ballerina just came out. I ended up grabbing a pre-screening of it at my local theater. Phenomenal ride. You have Len Wiseman directing this one. Ana de Armas is the lead in this movie, which is a spin-off in the John Wick series. Keanu Reeves, Ian McShane, Norman Reedus makes an appearance in this movie, and also the late Lance Reddick. Rest in peace. The movie has a lot of the vibes that we know and love from John Wick. The Ruska Roma, which is the group of ballerina protectors, assassins, kind of a mix of both there. This is going to take place in between John Wick 3 and John Wick 4. The lead character, again played by Ana de Armas, is called Eve, and Eve has had some childhood trauma that really kind of pushed her into this group to kind of fill that hole that was left in the void of her childhood. Now, this movie takes an interesting spin-off of John Wick in that, yes, Keanu Reeves is in this movie, and this is, again, a spoiler-free review, but we see that he's kind of a side character, with John Wick being on the sidelines for a lot of this movie. And with that, Eve is really the main character, and she is just striving to get revenge on the childhood that was taken from her. If you've seen the other John Wick movies, you know that the movie is set in this world of assassins. You have the Continental Hotel, and you have these various organizations that take bids to go and take these contracts to kill someone or take them in, whatever it happens to be. And this movie is no different. You get a lot of the stuff that we know and love from John Wick in this movie, and it's done in a little bit different way. Like we talked about, Keanu Reeves and John Wick is on the sidelines in this movie, and Ana has taken the main lead on it. And with that, you kind of go up from her childhood into being raised in this organization as a ballerina, as a protector, and they go through a lot of the training for the first half of the movie and kind of where she is in this training and how she can go and get above and beyond a lot of her peers. And you see how she meets John Wick and how she goes and learns how to become someone in his world and learn to do what he does. The setting of vengeance is very familiar for all the John Wick movies. It seems to be the heartbeat of pretty much all of them at this point. Now, this movie is really taking place with someone who has never been at the level of John Wick, so you can kind of go through the training. And Ana in real life did a lot of training for this movie, and it really does show. Now, they try to limit CGI for a lot of the movie, but there's a lot of things that you need to add in CGI to kind of get the final look to it, like access to the face and things like that. And there's some really good humorous parts of this movie that I was kind of surprised to see, because there's parts where you kind of see, I think they're thinking that maybe Eve, who's played by Ana there, she goes and thinks that she can do more than her capabilities allow her to during her training, and she suffers the consequences of not being able to do what she can do. And then you kind of see her grow over time and learn as she trains and understand how she can be the level of John Wick and try to get that vengeance that she deserves. The little CGI that was in this movie was done very well, very tastefully. Didn't see a whole lot of blurriness or anything like that. Choreography is amazing. A lot of practical effects, a ton of props, plates, knives, tons of knife work, cars, vehicles, you name it. Of course, guns, guns, and guns. I've noticed such a unique set of firearms in this movie, where I probably will do a separate video on like the top 10 guns from this movie for Ballerina, because there are so many interesting choices that they made, and they brought a lot back from the other movies. And rightfully so. They have a whole deal going on with Taron Tactical and his line of pretty much everything he makes and everything he puts his name on. So that is going to be featured in this movie as well, which we kind of expected would happen. But the firearm usage, the reloads, to an extent, the reloads and tactical movements aren't as precise as John Wick has been in the past, but again, she's really a trainee. She's kind of getting up to that point, and I don't think they focused as heavily on that this time, where they have focused in the past on John Wick is all about precision and reloads and tactical movements, whereas this ballerina is much more graceful and get a feeling for the situation and use some very unique methods to eliminate the bad guys. There are this whole scenes with flamethrowers that we've seen in the trailer, which was absolutely insane. They took some of the pointers and the action of how they film some of these scenes from the older movies into this one, and like above from what you see what's happening as they go through a room or go through a hallway, and it was just phenomenal to kind of see that. I just think from a film perspective, from how they set up these shots, that was done really well. There's also an entire scene with just grenades. I don't think I've ever seen a movie where it's just grenades, like 50 grenades, just using them throughout a building. It was a blast, literally. The lore of John Wick, the story of John Wick is really present in this movie. Possibly where this movie fell flat for me is that they didn't utilize a lot of the characters that we love to their full potential. They could have brought them in a little bit deeper. Now, granted, it's between 3 and 4 for John Wick, so I can kind of see why they maybe didn't want to focus on them. They really wanted to focus on Eve and her story, but it just seemed like they dumbed down them so much. Even Keanu Reeves, it just seems like they only used them a little bit when they could have had them partner up a little bit more, or have more in depth on maybe explaining to Eve how to do something, how to succeed at this vengeful plan. And I just felt like some of them were just skimmed over. Now, they could just because this is a side story in the world of John Wick, so maybe that's the case, but I thought some of those characters weren't utilized very well. Some of the action I thought was a little bit over the top. There's a lot of axes and things like that were done where it just seems like they're kind of going into more of a fantasy world of someone like Ana, who might have the training, but the stamina to do some of these fight scenes, it just goes straight through like non-stop. When of course John Wick, I guess, is a kind of a superhero in his own way as well, so maybe they're kind of thinking the same thing for Eve, just superhuman strength. It just seemed like some of them were a little bit long, so much so that while you're watching the scenes, you kind of just think like, okay, that's a little bit of disbelief here. Why weren't they not shot up, or why didn't this happen at this point? And there was also, I would say that the third thing I noticed that was kind of a, not much of a hit, but there was a lull in the middle of the movie that I thought, whereas John Wick is typically go, go, go. This one had a bit of a lull to tell her story a little bit more, and a little more just filler, I would say would be a good word for it. But overall, couple hours long, not too bad to get through if you're worried about the length of the film. Has all the action, the excitement it takes over the canon, as it were, how John Wick has built this universe out, so you can kind of see where she might fall in, and now you kind of fill some gaps on where John Wick was after 3 or during 3, and then moving into 4, which is kind of neat to see. So it fills some of those story plot, like not really holes, but gets a little more depth of the story there. Finally, the bad guys in this movie, you can't really make them too generic, because this whole universe is based around these different tribes or groups or cults of assassins, right? And how they live, and they have different sets of codes, and they talk about war within the tribes. So you can't really make it too generic. I think every time they come up with the new villain or something like that, it just seems to be that they would fit right in with the world that John Wick has built. But that being said, you kind of have to wonder, the Ruska Roma organization, they have their ballerinas, protectors, they take contracts, even show her on her phone making money and things like that, which is great. Well, some of these guys who Eve is trying to take vengeance on, how do they make their money? What do they do? What do you do here? They don't really explain in depth really what these tribes do and maybe why they're the way they are. It might be looking too far into it, but that is kind of John Wick in general. It's really just kind of skimming the surface, overall organization, overall setup of the universe, and then John just goes. I'm going to give Ballerina 84%. I think it was a fantastic ride. Again, the canon is there, the action is there. Ana clearly did a lot of training for this. I am going to have to do a video on just the firearms because they're such a blast, literally, plus maybe a few extra things that aren't really firearms that we'll talk about as bonuses in that video. So if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. We're new here at Movie Tactics, so hit the subscribe button. Let me know down below what you think about the channel. Also, have you seen Ballerina when you're watching this video? Have you seen it yet? What are your thoughts on it? Does it fit well with John Wick? Could you see these side stories being interesting enough to keep going for John Wick? We already know a lot of the movies seem to get better and better and better. Well, is this one taking a side step on the side? Is that going to be something that would interest you? So let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next movie review.